Hello everyone! Today's spotlight is on a movie I've contemplated reviewing several times in the past. For months now, I've had a hankering to revisit it, and since it seems fitting for spooky season, I've decided this is the time to go for it. Let's have a chat about the 2002 film Signs, written, produced, and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Graham Hess, a widowed father of two, and his younger brother Merrill, living on a farm in rural Pennsylvania, are disturbed one morning by the discovery of crop circles in their cornfield. Initially, they dismiss it as a practical joke. Lionel Pritchard and the Wolfington brothers at it again. But when similar circles show up around the world, and animals start acting aggressive, and strange lights appear in the skies over major cities, it seems the crop circles on the Hess property are no prank, but rather the calling card of visitors from another planet. I've got a lot to cover today, but before we go any further, let me make one thing clear. I love this movie. My mom loves this movie. We've seen it a lot, and no matter how snarky the naysayers get with their criticism of it, nothing will diminish the affection we feel for Signs. So now you know where I stand. For some reason, whenever I talk about an M. Night Shyamalan film, I feel compelled to do a run-through of his other movies, a crash course on what I think of each one I've seen. Since I've done that twice already in my reviews of Split and Old, I'll skip it this time. Suffice it to say that I agree with the general consensus that his body of work is intriguing, yet remarkably inconsistent. But that's the opinion now. When Signs was released 20 years ago, Shyamalan was riding a wave of massive success. The Sixth Sense was a huge hit that everyone talked about, and then Unbreakable did well, so his next movie was hotly anticipated. He went with a commercially appealing alien invasion story, and he had another success. Unfortunately, that's where the consistency ended. When the next one, The Village, came out, people flocked to see it because Shyamalan had become a household name. But that film left most viewers confused, irritated, and disappointed. Shyamalan's been a controversial filmmaker ever since. Whether you love him, love to hate him, or, like me, stand somewhere in the middle, if you've watched any of his movies, it's guaranteed you have an opinion. Personally, I'm torn between giving him credit for his independent thinking and his determination to do his own thing, knowing full well how divisive it will be, because he's very aware of public opinion, and wishing that once in a while someone would read his screenplay and say, you know, that's not a good idea, and he would actually take their advice. But regardless of what people think, he's certainly made them talk, and kept them talking. Seeing as he's only 52 and he's completed 14 films and counting, and made money even on ones that were critical disasters, there's no sign of him stopping anytime soon. Speaking of Signs, back to the movie, Signs is unquestionably my favorite thing he's done. I've seen it several times, as I said, and liked it consistently every time I've seen it. Yes, it's got some flaws. Yes, it's strange in that peculiar Shyamalan way. But for my mom and me, these things either don't matter or actually enhance our enjoyment of it. I've realized in the last year just how often she and I quote this movie. The lines are strange, nobody else understands our references, but we do it anyway, and we get a huge kick out of it. Here are some of the lines that we drop from time to time.
Why can't I get girlfriends?
It was very dark.
Dr. Bimbu, one of the authors of the book.
Bimbu?
Dad.
I guess that's his name.
You had a chone. My ballet recital.
13! I'm insane with anger! You should be playing Furry Furry Rabbit or Tea Party or something.
What's Furry Furry Rabbit?
It's a game, isn't it?
This is serious.
After this most recent viewing, there's one that I think I'll add to my repertoire.
Everybody in this house needs to calm down and eat some fruit or something.
I like the story's main plot and its subplot. I like that Shyamalan chose to depict a global alien invasion catastrophe on an intimate scale, using one family's perspective. We have no idea what the government is doing, what's going on around the world. Our knowledge is as limited as theirs. They only know what they see on TV and hear on the radio. The rest is speculation. Alien movies that go big on special effects and a spectacular let's save the world finish are fine, but it's also nice to see a different take that focuses on just a few average people and how the uncertainty of what's coming affects them. Signs is tense and drums up this feeling of fear and uneasiness throughout. Every aspect of the movie contributes to that mood, including composer and frequent Shyamalan collaborator James Newton Howard's frantic, string-heavy score. It's intentionally reminiscent of Bernard Herrmann's music for Psycho, and also, is it just me, or do the first notes we hear in the main titles also echo the opening strains of Saint-Saëns' Danse Macabre? Editing Weaselberry here. I just watched the main titles 3 times in a row, as you do, and they're really awesome. They're so simple, black dramatic text on a blue background, not unlike something I could have made in PowerPoint in junior high, and incidentally, the end titles have the same coloring, which is unconventional. But what makes the main titles so thrilling is how perfectly they sync with the music. The first names fade in and out, then the title dramatically comes in with the first bold appearance of the main theme. There's a thoughtful lull just over the composer's title, then the music transitions to its chase section with the text now shooting onto the screen with the beat. It's super cool. I'd also like to point out that as intense and horror movie-esque as the music can be, there are other times, like the scene with the baby monitor, when the music conveys a sense of awe, discovery, and tentative wonder.
Stop! There's 2 of them talking.
Setting, too, serves the plot well. The farmhouse seems an idyllic place, still, peaceful, spacious, secluded. As people who live in out-of-the-way homes in horror movies often find out, though, seclusion can be both good and bad. And cornfields. Cornfields are always a great place for creepy stuff to happen. Shyamalan knew how to use that cornfield, which they did all kinds of things to make it lush and green. Take the spooky night sequence where Graham pursues what he hopes is a prankster deep into the field, getting swallowed up by the stalks and the darkness until he emerges in the crop circle. It's one of several fantastic scenes. That cornfield isn't just good for visuals either. There's so much rustling that when Merrill pauses and looks out, you can't tell if there's anything there or not. The aliens can camouflage themselves, meaning you may not see them, so I'm never 100% sure that there isn't something hidden in this shot. Editing Weaselberry here again, just to point out that the positioning of the camera behind the corn here gives us the impression the character is being watched. That's our first hint that an alien is nearby, seconded by the dog's furious barking. I'd also like to mention that in the scene where the dog threatens Bo and Morgan has to defend her, we see nothing, but something made that dog react. And after the first couple viewings, I started scanning the background for anything out of place. I'm pretty sure there's nothing there, but I have to look. This movie compels you to be wary of even the most harmless shots, especially if you hear a dog barking. Now, something Shyamalan often takes flack for, and I've been very critical of this with other films, is his eccentric characters and their offbeat dialogue. It's fairly common for characters in his movies to be a little quirky and speak in a way that's just a little off, not quite the way people talk in real life. In some cases, it's downright distracting. It's bad dialogue that's delivered poorly. There's nothing the actors can do to make it sound convincing. But in this film, the oddness works, or at least it works for me, especially with the small country town vibe. The inhabitants of this community get just enough screen time to make an impression. The army recruiter who feels like he stepped straight out of the 1950s. The couple who own the bookshop. He thinks this whole thing is a conspiracy to sell soda, and she knows exactly where in the store that one book about extraterrestrials is. Cherry Jones's police officer really underscores that small-town feel, with her casual talk of local business kerfuffles and needing a cup of Edgar's coffee. She's got a great character introduction. Instantly you recognize her type, she's humorous, and you like her. Too bad she only has a few scenes. But Shyamalan really wants to keep the focus trained on the members of the Hess family, who are struggling to understand these strange occurrences while still reeling from a tragic loss. Mel Gibson plays Graham, the former preacher who's left the church following the sudden death of his wife in a car accident. That Graham blames God for taking his wife so soon and in such a horrible way is as essential to the plot as the fact that aliens are coming to the planet. The title Signs has a double meaning, referring to signs of life existing elsewhere in the universe and signs of a higher power taking an active interest in the affairs of men. When we watched The Patriot a few months ago, my mom observed that the characters Mel Gibson plays in the two films are not dissimilar, sober widowers who are goaded into action to defend their families. I think his performance here as Graham, who himself is bad at performing, is quite good. Frequently he gets this look on his face like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. But he can't help getting drawn in.
We already took some of your friends downtown in a paddy wagon.
His speech to the alien locked in the pantry, which is like the sheriff's monologue from a corny old cowboy movie, is hilarious, especially when you consider what he's talking to.
Just tell us your name and why you did it, and we'll give you the same deal we gave the others. Don't throw your life away, son.
Joaquin Phoenix as Uncle Merrill, who moved in to help the family after the accident, is great too. He's funny and likable. He underplays his role, yet I appreciate that he gives a performance that's totally sincere, even when he has to do something absurd. I seriously considered making myself a tinfoil hat to wear for this review, but I just couldn't bring myself to waste that much foil. Times are hard. You gotta make tough choices. Compared to Graham, who's hesitant and deliberate and kind of a square, Merrill is a take-action kind of guy. Also more of an optimist, and it turns out he has stronger faith than his brother, which leads to an unexpected confrontation. The two kids, Morgan and Beau, are played by Rory Culkin, who, yes, is Macaulay's little brother, and Abigail Breslin, making her feature film debut. Morgan is kind of a spooky kid because he's just so serious, while Beau is adorable, and I totally get her hang-up about not finishing her glasses of water. I went through a similar phase when I was little. Both of them are unusually quiet, solemn children, as if the loss of their mother has forced them to grow up too soon. Something I feel gives this film additional meaning is the way it emphasizes the family's grief and the father's and son's tacit resentment. Signs does have a significant spiritual or religious subplot. It has the audacity to tackle one of life's biggest questions. Why does God allow bad things to happen? How can a God who claims to love his children let them suffer? Why does God allow us to suffer through things like sickness, natural disasters, war, poverty, famine? It's a question that I'm sure gets asked every day by someone on Earth, and it's a question people have been asking for thousands of years. It's at the center of the book of Job in the Old Testament. Like Job's friends did, we try to come up with different explanations, which may or may not be the right answers. It's a judgment, it's a test, It's God's way of teaching us a lesson. It's God's way of drawing his people back to him. Shyamalan doesn't go so far as to answer the question on a universal level, but he does provide an explanation for the Hess family's suffering and what it all means. This is a story that's full of something film critics tend to loathe. So-called coincidences. Things that just so happen to occur. Lucky twists of fate, if you choose to see it that way. Several elements are set up early on that get a payoff in the climax. Beau's glasses of water littering the house, Meryl's baseball bat and strikeout record, Morgan's asthma. Depending on your perspective, the payoff may be ridiculous, far-fetched, illogical, even stupid, but the way things often work out in real life, from our finite point of view, may seem far-fetched and illogical, because we don't see the whole picture. And Shyamalan's argument is that these elements in his story are not coincidences. Granted, these things were contrived by Shyamalan as the writer, but they are representative of those strange twists that do happen in reality. Stories you hear where something happens, somebody gets rescued just in the nick of time, or somebody was about to do one thing and something else prevented them, and it was actually an inconvenience, but then they came to find out afterward that it saved them from a horrible fate. The apparent plot conveniences in this film are neither coincidence, nor luck, nor dumb or lazy storytelling. They are clearly presented as signs of divine intervention. Not in the sense of a deus ex machina, God doesn't show up to smite the alien with a lightning bolt, but in the sense of divine providence, the protective care of an all-knowing sovereign God. There's a pivotal scene where everyone gets to pick their favorite food for their last dinner before the invasion, but when they sit down to eat, nobody has an appetite, they're too tense. Morgan suggests that it might help if they pray first, and when Graham bluntly refuses, Morgan lets loose his resentment of his father for blaming God, and finally the unspoken tension that's been simmering under the surface comes out. In an emotionally cathartic moment before the storm, the family makes peace with each other. But Graham hasn't yet made peace with God, and ultimately, that's the resolution Shyamalan is driving toward. Because though Graham has turned away from God, God has not turned away from him, as Graham later realizes. For me, and I speak as a Christian, this material and Shyamalan's willingness to go there gives the film extra significance, and I'm sure it's one of the reasons why I keep coming back to it. I agree with the message. Sometimes I may refer to something as a coincidence, but in the back of my mind, I know it's more than that. God is in control, and he's aware of everything that happens to us, good or bad. He has reasons for allowing bad things to happen. Some I may understand, some I may not. Most I don't understand, but that's okay. I don't have to understand everything. I just have to be still and know that he is God. Of course, none of what I have just said is popular or even acceptable in some circles. This movie's going to bother some people by going in that direction, and so is this discussion. That's fine. I knew that perfectly well going into it. It's part of the film, though, even if it's not as talked about as the aliens. And with that sloppy segue, let's talk about the aliens. This is one of those movies where the first time I saw it, I had so much trouble going to sleep afterward that I needed to keep the light on all night. The light on and the door open a crack. Because it scared me so much, and yet I really liked the movie and I wanted to be able to watch it again, I memorized where all the shots that included aliens were, so I'd know exactly when to look away. This is not the only movie that I've done this with. I am proud to announce, though, that I did not look away this time. I watched the whole thing, and then I didn't have any trouble sleeping. Granted, we did watch it in the afternoon, so that helped. And I will say, in full disclosure, I stayed up until 4 in the morning last night writing this review, so I was very engaged in all of signs in my brain, and so then when I went to go to sleep, I rolled over, faced the wall, and there were a couple times where I had to just peek over my shoulder to make sure there wasn't an alien in the room. Ugh, it's so embarrassing. One of my favorite scenes is also the one that terrified me the most, the part where Meryl, with the TV in the closet, watches the home video of the Brazilian birthday party that's so alarming the newscaster has to issue a content advisory before they roll the tape. So many things make this scary. The build-up, the chaotic din of the children's panicky voices, the duh when we finally get our first startling sight of the alien, which I'm going to describe instead of showing you a picture of it. It's this greenish-gray humanoid, tall, thin, and gangly, sinister in look and movement, popping into frame and glaring at us as if we're the intruders. What really caps the scene off, though, is Meryl's horrified reaction. He's just like, "Move, children! Vamonos!" And then the alien shows up and he's like, "Ah!" It's so good. It's almost as creepy as a scene much earlier on where we spot an alien on the roof. It's so quick, a blink and you'll miss it kind of shot. The figure, though, is just so... Ugh. The idea of suddenly seeing anybody on your roof is distressing. But that? Because I've always looked away during the final confrontation, I don't think I ever realized that the alien in the pantry and the one in the living room are one and the same. My mom's theory is that that alien tracked Graham down on purpose to get revenge for him chopping off its fingers. She has always been exasperated with me for not looking at the screen and picking up on that. I remember there have been so many times when we were watching the movie and she was like, "Look, no, you're gonna miss it. See, you see the reflection of the alien in the TV screen. No, see the little girl screaming on its back. Oh, come on, you're missing this. This is important." I will say that now that I've watched the whole thing, I do find the CGI here a little fuzzy or furry, especially in the close-ups. So perhaps these effects have aged somewhat. If that's the case, it's just as well the aliens only get less than 2 whole minutes of screen time. I had no idea it was so little, and that really makes me appreciate how Shyamalan uses the power of suggestion. We see passing bodies blocking the light in the cracks between the boards. We hear and see a creaking swing and hear a thud on the roof, not to mention those eerie clicks and moans picked up by the baby monitor. An effective horror movie, in my opinion, makes you look and listen intently. Sound is crucial in a scary movie, and Signs does both. It makes you look and it makes you listen. Now, elephant in the room, I've got to address this because everyone else does, and I'm sure there are going to be comments about it. There are people who are going to leave comments about it before they've even gotten 3 minutes into the video. Yes, it's bizarre and apparently kind of dumb that an intelligent race of aliens who have a problem with water would travel all this way to invade a planet that's surface is 70% water. I've heard this criticism dozens of times, and yes, I acknowledge that it seems kind of silly, but, well, for one thing, there are explanations for it, like all of their landing sites are far away from water, and it does seem that they intended to wipe us all out before we could figure out their Achilles heel. I know it's all some people think about whenever this movie comes up. It's a plot hole that completely destroys the movie's credibility for them, but it doesn't bother me. I don't fixate on it. nor do I fixate on all the other things people take issue with. I guess the fact of the matter is, I just don't care, and I'm certainly not going to let the Nostalgia Critic or Watch Mojo tell me what to think about this movie. That said, I'm not arguing that this is a perfect film. M. Night Shyamalan does make some bizarre choices. The awkward framing in the pharmacy I can understand because it's an awkward scene between awkward people, but there are some places where he holds on a shot for too long.
I'll take it.
Cut. Cut! Cut! Admittedly, Graham's "there are two kinds of people" monologue is flawed. Basically, he's oversimplifying, but the same thing could be said of most speeches like that. I don't complain too much because, first, this grim, pessimistic moment is revelatory for Graham's character, and it's immediately precipitated by Meryl's apparent non sequitur about the hot girl at the party that he almost kissed, which is his bizarre but pithy explanation for why he's a miracle man. Of course, Shyamalan himself makes a couple appearances as the vet who accidentally killed the wife. We refer to these as the director's cameo, but it's more than a cameo, it's a full-on part, small but key. His character is only as strange as everybody else, I guess. The conversation he has with Graham is frustrating in the way he keeps rambling without responding to Graham's questions. Also, I get that what happened was a freak accident, and he feels guilty about it, but saying, "I guess it was meant to be," is the most unfeeling comment he could make. I'm sure it's meant to play into the whole no coincidences theme, but it's both ham-fisted and tasteless. And I've got a few more random observations. My mom would probably like me to point out the crop circle print in the curtains and the celestial galactic decorating in the kids' room. She's always liked that little touch. I just found out that the artwork in Dr. Bimbu's book, including the creepy look-alike of the Hess house, was done by Shyamalan's daughter. That's cool. And the crop circles, by the way, were made by hand, no CGI. In various ways, Signs is reminiscent of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. A handful of characters stuck in an isolated place, defending their homestead against attack by boarding up windows and doors, the viewer kept in the dark about what carnage is unfolding in other places, and so on. Shyamalan has stated on multiple occasions, including, if I remember correctly, on the director's commentary, that he drew inspiration from The Birds and even had the cast study it. We are fans of The Birds in this family, so that's a-okay with us. But he also was inspired by Night of the Living Dead and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and he includes a nod to The War of the Worlds, as well as a couple other Hitchcock films, so really, it's no wonder I like it. I think that's about all I have to say about this movie. By a long shot, I find it Shyamalan's most satisfying film. It checks so many boxes for me. For us, I should say. I ought to include my mom in this. We always watch it together. We love it because it's got aliens, and it scares us, but also because it makes us laugh. There's something just endearing about it, and on a more personal level, it's a moving story of faith restored, a man making peace with God and with his children. I hope you enjoyed this review. It got a little long-winded again, sorry about that. Let me know what you think of Signs in the comments below. I'll brace myself for any comments that insist on telling me I'm wrong, and it's one of the stupidest movies ever. But if you also enjoy the movie, it would be lovely to hear from you. So go ahead and leave your thoughts, whatever they may be, down there, and I look forward to reading them. See you next week with another review, and as always, thanks for watching.